I will greet you again. Shana Tova. Or alternatively, the answer is Gam Lecha. Gam Lecha. Gam Lecha. Shana Tova, Gam Lecha. That is also to you. Okay? Or I can say Shana Tova Lachem, which will mean good year to all of you. So today is the second day of Rosh HaShanah, Jewish New Year 5784. And that year is legendarily going back all the way to creation. The creation is 5,784 years ago. Of course not. We are not creationists, but it is a very interesting number, and we might get back to it. Jewish New Year is also called Yom Teruah, Day of Blasting, because they are blowing shofar. Those are those special horns, or shofarot will be the plural. Interestingly, shofar is feminine based upon the plural. Those picturesque and distinctive ram horns, and they are being blown many times during these days, because this is the high holiday for our Jewish neighbors. Horns were blasted and prayer is chanted, Hayom Harat Olam. On this day, the world has its beginning. That is at least the most standard English translation, even though more precisely it'll be this day, inception of eternity. And have you noticed the ambiguity in respect of time? This day, dash, inception of eternity. Can you tell whether it was, is, or will be? You cannot. That is intentional. It is an intentional, and Hebrew allows that because it is a nominal clause. There is no verb, so you cannot tell. And even if there was a verb, Hebrew is a very interesting language. I will do an excursus here, because it does not have tenses. Hebrew does not have tenses. Classical biblical Hebrew does not have tenses. It has aspects, whether something has been done or something is ongoing. So perfective and imperfective aspect of the verb, but no tenses. Only later it became. And that will be also our main focus, looking at how this holiday and this long tradition of this holiday has influence upon us and our understanding. And I will not speak about the Jewish New Year folklore anymore, partly because there are so many and diverse traditions between, say, Ashkenazi and Sephardic Jews and many other subgroups and modern streams. And you are probably aware of it living in New York City, probably the largest Jewish city in the world, maybe after Tel Aviv. Here in New York City, you might know some of it already from your family. People are married to Jewish people. Or you can easily ask your Jewish neighbors. Our task will be deeper. Perhaps we can call it more solemn. I want to take us behind the scenes into the roots and marvelous, amazing insights of this unique, archaic, high holy day. So let us start where every sermon actually should start, with listening to the Word of God. This time, literally, the divine commandment of this holy day.
Today's scripture lesson is taken from Leviticus chapter 23, verses 23 and 24. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Speak to the people of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the 1st day of the month, you shall observe a day of complete rest, a holy convocation commemorated with trumpet blasts." This is the word of the Lord.
Yes, so have you noticed trumpet blast? That is the main feature of this holiday. And the reason of the names of this holy name I mentioned, Yom Teruah. But there is an even more mysterious and enigmatic reality here. This is a New Year celebration. You mentioned it. But even in the Bible, in that commandment to mark it and to celebrate it, in the Hebrew Bible, that Rosh HaShanah, head of the year, is commanded as the first day of the 7th month. It is not named there, but we know it is called Tishri. Why is it not the first day of the 1st month, you might ask? Isn't it interesting to have holiday, New Year, and not first day of the 1st month, which would be Nisan, which is in spring? I would like to compare it and explain it with the 2 clocks on the Jewish town hall in the place where I am coming from, in Prague. And you have it on your bulletins, and I hope that it is appearing now on the monitors also for those who are online or are in the pews. So there on the picture, you actually have very interesting ancient synagogue. It's called Old New Synagogue in Prague. That's that brick facade on the left side of the picture. You can have it here, this one. And it's called Old New because there was a time when it was new. There was much older one, but this one was built in year 1270, and it is continuously used for worship. People are still worshiping there, and it's most likely the oldest continuously used synagogue in Europe. But that's not why it's kind of interesting thing, 750 years old worship space, just think about it. But the clock across from that synagogue, or clocks there, are more interesting. The normal clock is that upper one with Roman numerals, and you can easily say that it tells the time 1:45, 1:45. But then there is another clock with Hebrew letters, and those Hebrew letters are functioning here as numerals. And those numerals, you might say, what kind of time is it? Well, it is the same time, 1:45, because that clock goes counterclockwise. I think that it is partly just playing with the Hebrew being read the other direction than we read the Latin script. It has also flipped pointers, the arms. We have a shorter one showing the hour and longer one showing the minutes, and they have that flipped, if you look at it. But these 2 clocks point in different directions, but they are showing the same time. And I'm using it as an illustration for this new year commanded by the Lord on the 7th month. Because like with these clocks, there are two different systems of showing the time. With the calendars, there were clearly two different calendars being used. A civil calendar developed by Babylonian astronomers, which began in spring, and everyone was following it back then. But then there was an older religious calendar for West Semitic people, where Hebrews were part of this larger group, or Canaanites they were called. And for them, that older and later only religious calendar began in autumn. And among the Hebrews and their neighbors, this religious calendar predated their adoption of the Babylonian calendar. For regular life, they were using Babylonian because it was more precise. There are always problems with solar cycles and moon cycles and all the counting and so on. So they used that better, more precise Babylonian calendar, but they were keeping in their worship, they were keeping their own previous, older calendar, Israelites and Jews. It was the original calendar of the people around the eastern Mediterranean seashore. I know it, for instance, from Ugarit, which is kind of my hobby, going to the Bronze Age, predating the Bible. So Rosh HaShanah, celebration of the new year in autumn, that is a very, very, very old practice. It predates written sources and goes back when the Hebrew people were still Canaanites. Our Jewish neighbors are keeping and preserving this archaic, ancient tradition from before our current calendar, which is called Gregorian calendar, or before Julian calendar, Julius Caesar, before Babylonian calendar, from before they themselves were distinct people, from before their and our religion began. Isn't it marvelous? Just think about it. You know, I mentioned Ugarit, that goes back 3,000 years back. And we know that they were more or less following this kind of calendar with autumn, New Year. But those are the first signs in writing. It probably went further back, maybe almost those 6,000 years they are celebrating. You know, not from the creation, but from the time when they came up with that idea of celebrating it as a new year. But in the roots of that celebration and in those ancient times rests even bigger surprise, or bigger surprises, greater marvelous for us. Imagine that from their West Semitic vocabulary, from their words they were using in everyday life, from their language they were speaking in between themselves, from the meaning of their words, we can discern that they not only had this different calendar, they also were differently oriented in the time around them. They imagined that time differently. There are many ways to visualize time, like a circle, there'll be the clock, or spiral, or some other different ways. Most common these days is that we envision a future before us, in front of us. You know, that's future. I'm looking to the future. While past is behind us. Am I right? Do you visualize the time like that? We are constantly rushing forward. Life is like a race. If we stop for a moment, we are left behind. We are overtaken. Frankly, it often feels like a treadmill. You know, you're running on treadmills. Or even better, a hamster wheel. spurting forward just to find ourselves carried back or being inevitably overtaken by a situation. Or younger people around us, youngsters, or new technology, or anything that is our perceptive of that. Now imagine that in the Hebrew, Canaanite, or West Semitic languages, that archaic, which created these archaic calendars, they had it associated and completely differently, actually in opposite way of perceiving time. So how do I know that they visualized it that way? Because the word kedem is a word for east. It will be that direction. That's east. And people normally position themselves facing east, facing rising sun. And that was front also. Kedem was in front, whatever was from the front. But it was also the name or way of talking about the past, what already happened, the ancient times, Kedem. While Achareh or Acharon was word for the back, what is behind, but also used as a word for future, temporarily for the future. So they perceive the past in front of them and future behind them. I know I'm now asking you to do mental gymnastics, that it might be, and I was struggling with it, how to help us to think of it. What would be the best way of imagining it in our daily living? So let us think about it. If we are oriented in time that way, like past in front of us and future behind us, our life simply cannot be a wild, sharp elbow race towards the future. That does not work. Not any longer that treadmill idea or hamster wheel experience. That's not how it works. Maybe the best way of imagining it is a procession. Like we just started to process at the beginning of the service, or recession, going after the worship out. Where our ancestors in that procession are before us. That's the past. We line up behind them as they process. We follow in their footsteps. And behind us are lining up following generations. Behind us are lining up our children, our descendants, those coming after us. And do you recognize the beauty, solemnity of this image? But I would here kind of push that idea of also commitment and responsibility, a sense of duty. We are not any longer madly chasing mirages of the future. We are asked to join in and to walk faithfully. And as we walk, make space for the future generations after us. This perception of time with the past before us and the future behind us I would claim is psychologically and spiritually calming and healing. It's leading to healthy introspection. And that is what starts with Rosh HaShanah and our Jewish neighbors. Because in few days there'll be Yom Kippur, and Rosh HaShanah is actually starting this process of self-examination, reminding us of our personal, familiar, societal, and these days especially environmental responsibilities towards the future generations, so that they do have a place where they can follow, and they have in us those to follow. So this is that divine gift of Rosh HaShanah, the new year or head of a year. And now you know why it is worth of keeping besides all the intervening calendars in between. Hayom Harat Olam, this day is the inception of eternity. Think about it. And that ambiguous meaning of it. It can be this moment, which is the beginning of eternity for you and me. From now on, that creation goes forward or backward. So, Shana Tova Lachulanu, good year to all of us. Lachulanu means to all of us.